Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 111, and it's been a long time in coming. And to celebrate the return of a Stephen King focus podcast, I've got with me a Stephen King expert, and that would be Bev Vincent. Hello, Bev. How are you doing?
Hello, Lou. I'm doing just fine. Good to talk to you.
Yes, good to talk to you again. And we were talking before we started about all the fun things that were going on in Texas with not just COVID, but the power grid failure and all that. So you've had a pretty interesting year.
It's been an interesting year. My wife and I have been in pretty much virtual lockdown since almost exactly a year ago today.
Yeah.
I've still got the same tank of gas in my car that I had last March.
Wow.
We really have taken this thing seriously. We go out for groceries and that's it. So yeah, it's been an interesting year. And then of course we had the big freeze about a month ago.
Yeah.
Which sort of paralyzed the state and gave the plumbers lots of work to do and kept them happy. And
yeah. Yep. Has the water situation returned back to normal for everyone now, or?
To the best of my knowledge,
yeah.
We never lost water and we never had to boil water, but some parts of Houston were under a boil order for quite a period of time, like 3 or 4 days. Yeah, and I mean that's losing power is one thing, but losing water is not something that you would expect.
No.
And especially with the streets as bad as they were, people really weren't able to get out to get it if it was available at all.
Yeah. And as a Canadian, you must have been kind of shaking your head though.
Well, I wasn't getting a lot of sympathy from my friends back in Canada when I was saying, "My gosh, it's minus 14 here," and somebody'd say, "Yeah, you think that's bad? It's minus 40 here."
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is only the second time I've seen the temperature go down to single digits Fahrenheit in the 32 years that I've been here. So yeah, it's been a trip. If it's not one damn thing, it's another.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully 2021 will be a better year. It can't get any worse than 2020.
I hope so. My wife and I have both had our first vaccine shots.
Oh, nice.
2 weeks ago today, and then 2 weeks from today we got our second one, and then.
Oh, very good. Very good. And how are they doing that? Because are they doing it by age or birth year?
They're doing it by age.
Okay.
But my wife is in the healthcare business, so those and she said, well, there's not much use in just her getting vaccinated if she's going to come home to me. So we go. But right now, Texas is 50 and up, so I would qualify for that now too.
Okay, yeah, they're doing it by birth year here in Canada. I'm on the waiting list to still get my first shot. I'm hoping it'll be in April sometime, so we'll see. But let's turn to more pleasant topics. And as I mentioned off the top, it's been quite a while since I've done a Stephen King focused podcast. I've been doing a lot of what I call bonus episodes where I've been interviewing other writers, and I've really enjoyed that to get to learn how everybody ticks because every writer is different. And we'll get into that with you a bit too, Bev. But we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of your things. We'll start with one of your projects that you want to mention, and then we'll get into a bunch of King stuff, and then we'll come back to one of your other projects, and then we'll close out with our thoughts on King's latest book later. And I'm going to torture myself before I do anything further. Have you read Billy Summers yet?
I have not. No, I have not.
Okay.
No.
Wow. Okay. That's unusual, but I'm sure it's not a long away for you.
Probably not. We're March, April, May, June, July, August. So 5 months. Yeah, but probably fairly soon. I'll probably get a copy.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's start with the first of your two projects is Dissonant Harmonies that you co-wrote with Brian Keene, another horror writer. And just before you get into that, I just want to set up who you are a little bit better. I'm sorry, I should have done that off the top, but I just want to mention for people who haven't listened to previous episodes who Bev is. Bev is acknowledged as a Stephen King expert, and that goes way back to Usenet days, and can go to Bev's site and find out more about that. He's also the author of the Dark Tower Companion, The Road to the Dark Tower, which is a excellent tour of the Stephen King Dark Tower series. He's also done a couple of trivia books books about King. He's done the excellent Stephen King Illustrated Companion, which is just a fantastic treasure trove of King material that you won't find anywhere else. And I just can't gush about that enough as well. He's most recently co-edited an anthology with Stephen King called Flight or Fright, which contains all stories related to something that a lot of us probably haven't done lately, is getting on an airplane. And there's some great stories in there. I think off the top of my head, the Joe Hill story is fantastic. But there's some oldies in there as well. So definitely check that out. Bev has a lot of short fiction magazines like Ellery Queen, Alfred Hitchcock, some Borderlands, and lots of other stuff that you can check out on Bev's page. And so with that introduction, Bev, why don't you talk about your Dissonant Harmonies?
So Brian Keene and I have been friends probably for 20 years. We met each other at various World Horror Convention and similar sorts of events over the years. But one of our favorite conferences is called NECON, and it's the Northeast Writers Convention. And it's a very low-key convention. We call it Camp NECON. People just sort of hang out. There are some panels, but mostly it's just a chance to get together and visit with people. And one of the things that we talk about is what we do when we write. You know, some people like to listen to music, some people need silence. So Brian and I both like to listen to music. And what we've discovered over the course of our discussions is that we have a fair amount of overlap in the types of music that we listen to. But then there's quite a bit of stuff that he listens to that don't have much exposure to, and vice versa. So we came up with this idea to create a playlist for the other person to listen to while we each wrote. And I think originally the concept, and this goes all the way back to like 2007 is my earliest notes on this. I think originally we were going to do a collection of short stories, but then we settled on each one of us writing a novella. And it wasn't so much that the music would necessarily, the story would be about something to do with the music, but the music would just be playing constantly while we wrote whatever, story idea came along with to us. Okay. And so we each made about a CD's worth of music, 14, 16, 17 songs, and sent it to the other person, and we wrote novellas. And so Dissonant Harmonies is the collection. My novella is called The Dead of Winter, and Brian's is called The Motel at the End of the World. The book's coming out from Cemetery Dance in two versions. There's a limited edition hardcover, which is limited to their Cemetery Dance Collectors Club. And that order period has already closed, and they only printed as many copies as people for that ordered. Okay. But then we're also doing a paperback ebook version, which should be coming out fairly soon. But talking to Cemetery Dance this past week, and it could be like within the next few weeks or months, whatever their print schedule is like. Cool. The book also has, because it's music-based, we each have a whole section about the music. And so I talk about why did I pick these songs for Brian, and Brian responds about what those songs, how he responded to them, and then we do the same thing in reverse for Brian's list for me. Right. Okay. Since this was such a long time in the works, did you ever have to update or change your music list? Or was that something you said, no, we're never going to change this because it'll just ruin the flow of what we're doing? Yeah, we stayed with the same music list. But one interesting thing that happened was that Brian, I have had my story done for quite a number of years. And Brian had a story that he wrote, and then he was just about finished with it when he read something else, which was Stephen King's Afterlife. And he said, this is just too similar to that. Even though I hadn't read it beforehand, I said, I can't do that. So he had to go back and write a brand new story. Okay, cool. And do your stories overlap each other in any way, or? Not in any way, no. No? Okay. My story takes place in a small town in southern Rhode Island. During a blizzard, speaking of weather-related things, and it's about something strange that comes out of the storm, and these two sort of estranged brothers have to deal with what's going on. And Brian's has to do with now my memory's going to fail me right now. It's the thing where people think they remember things that happened, but they completely, it's something that's just a false memory. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not going to come up with it. Yeah, it's got a name, and it has to do with, people who think that the Berenstain Bears were the Berenstain Bears, or such and such a person was in such a movie and they never were.
Okay.
And it's that sort of concept.
Okay. Well, that's cool. And you're not quite sure of when the release date is on Cemetery Dance yet, though.
The limited editions, sometimes they take a little bit longer to go into production. The paperback, I'm hoping, will go soon. I think Cemetery Dance will be putting up a page for it very shortly.
Okay.
I'm hoping so we're in March, April, May, again, depending on how they get a slot in with their printer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, we'll keep an eye out for it. I'm sure it'll pop up on your website, and I'm sure you'll tweet about it and whatnot and other social media.
I'm not quiet when it comes to these things.
No, you can't afford to be nowadays. And I'm sure Cemetery Dance will also have some sort of announce. So I look forward to reading it. Do you know roughly how many pages it is? Or
it's about 176.
Oh, that's a fairly good size.
And it's the Mandela effect is the thing I was trying to come up with a few minutes ago.
Okay, cool. There you go.
Because there's people who think that Nelson Mandela died in prison.
Okay.
And that's sort of
right.
false memory thing.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to mention about it?
We'll probably put up a Spotify playlist of the music when the book becomes available, so people can listen along if they choose to.
Mm-hmm.
The music is all over the place. There's electronica, there's country, there's heavy metal, there's AOR. It's everything that you can possibly imagine.
Okay, I imagine the heavy metal's from Brian and not from you.
For the most part, and the but so is the country.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas I went into some fairly deep cuts on electronica and techno, which are things that I like to listen to when I write.
Okay. And did you and Brian say to each other, "Man, I'm glad you gave me this list. I didn't even know some of these songs."
Absolutely. That's part of our response part in the book. We say, "I'd never heard of this before," or I never really listened to this before, and there's a couple of cases where one or the other of us said, "Yeah, I don't really like that so much," but okay, I had to listen to it, so I did.
I'm just curious, was Alan Parsons in there anywhere? Or?
Alan Parsons is in there.
Right.
I did one deep cut for Brian, because Brian likes Alan Parsons too, but I gave him a song that was on one of the expanded reissues from Vulture Culture.
Oh, okay.
It's called No Answers, Only Questions.
Okay. Very cool. Okay, so with that, unless there's something else you want to add, are you ready to turn to some King talk now? Or
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So there's been a bunch of adaptations on TV and whatnot for King over the last couple of years, and haven't really on the podcast talked about them too much. And so we're just going to run down the list of them. We're not going to go in great depth, but I just wanted your overall impressions of the series and whatnot. Let's turn to Castle Rock Season 2, which was, of course, the Annie Wilkes arc. And I enjoyed the season. I wasn't too crazy about some of the supernatural stuff that they brought in later on, because I found that hard to reconcile with the character that comes into Misery. But beyond that, I have to say that I thought Lizzie Kaplan was just fantastic as Annie Wilkes. So she really did a great job of channeling the work that Kathy Bates did in the movie version. Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing that you have to do with Castle Rock is not look at it as, this isn't the story of Annie Wilkes who eventually becomes the character in Misery. This is the Annie Wilkes who's in some other reality, another level of the tower, because you would drive yourself crazy trying to rationalize all of the points with the novel. And the people working on this were essentially given free rein to just pick and choose and tie things together and do whatever they wanted, and not really be beholden to the quote-unquote reality of the Stephen King universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Lizzie Kaplan was terrific. The actress who played her daughter, I do appreciate the fact that they wanted to make at least some connection back to the events of the first season, which they ultimately do towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we can blame COVID for is I think we might have gotten a third season if everything hadn't been shut down by the coronavirus.
Right.
And it just put so many things like this, especially, which are like one-offs.
Mm-hmm.
It was just easy for them to say, I think, that we're not going to do another one.
Right. Yeah,
it's a shame.
I agree. I did enjoy the second season more than the first one. I just thought it flowed a bit better than the other one did. And I think the next series is probably also fell victim to the COVID excuse, is Mr. Mercedes Season 3. And curious to hear what you thought of Season 3.
Kate Mulgrew. God, she's good. Oh my God, she's so good. I mean, anybody who's familiar with her from other stuff, like her Star Trek series and that, are just going to sit there and say, is this the same person?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so we're adopting Finders Keepers in season 3. They move things around so that, they didn't have to have their bright star from Mr. Mercedes be completely missing in season 2. So they juggled things around.
Yeah.
I thought they did a really, really good job. And the series is getting a new life because it's been picked up by Peacock, which is the NBC streaming app.
Mm-hmm.
And so all 3 seasons are now available to a much wider audience.
Yeah.
And I say audience. Originally, it was only available on the Audience Network,
right?
Which is AT&T's streaming channel, but that channel shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't really much chance that the audience was going to do a 4th season anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But depending on its success on Peacock, Jack Bender is saying that they have ideas and they would be willing to go back and do a 4th season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into spoilers because so few people have seen it, but it's definitely there's definitely hooks in there for a 4th season, and it still could pull out stuff that was in the 3rd book. But I agree with you. My goodness, Kate Mulgrew, she was amazing.
Yeah, and Brendan Gleeson isn't exactly probably what everybody pictured.
Right.
For Bill Hodges, because he's Irish, and that was never part of the original concept. But I mean, he is so good. Mm-hmm. And I like what they've done with music through the series.
Yes.
There's so much really good classic music that is part of his library.
Yeah, for sure.
The introduction of his next door neighbor, Ida Silver, played by Holland Taylor.
Yep.
Not in the books, but she really adds a whole extra dimension to the series.
Yeah, and this season was like 6 degrees of John Rothstein separation because everybody was had some sort of relationship to him. Even Ida did, so that was interesting. I loved, as you mentioned, Kate was fantastic, and like if you've only seen her as Captain Janeway, you're going to be totally shocked. You might be a little more prepared if you've seen her in Orange is the New Black as a Russian mafia leader, but in this series, she goes for it, and this series does not hold back on the gore.
There's a great cameo. Steve finally has his cameo in season 2.
Yes,
and it was so good that they use it in the opening credits to season 3.
And I love the opening credits for this season. I think they're the best ones from any of the seasons. There's one slight spoiler that I have to give. There's one character, Morris Bellamy, played by Gabriel Ebert, and it becomes a running gag. You don't realize it at first because it's kind of gradual, but then like in the last 4 or 5 episodes, this guy's getting constantly hurt in some sort of and it gets more ridiculous with each passing episode. So I was just waiting for what was going to happen in the final episode, and it was pretty funny.
Yeah, and then we've got Bruce Dern.
Yeah,
and Bruce Dern at his Bruce Derniest.
Yeah, I wish he was in it more actually, but
but I'm glad that they found a way to carry him through as much as they did. But I just love that his first meeting with Morris, and that was just such a great scene. I love to see it play out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the interesting thing was watching this was post The Outsider was coming back to this other version of Holly Gibney.
Yes.
And I can't really say that I favor one portrayal over the other. They're 2 different cuts, but I like both of them. So I was, and they really pump up the Lou character, Lou Linklater, and Rita Wohl. She was fantastic, man. She was really good.
Yeah. The dichotomy of the 2 Holly characters is interesting. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we're not going to get to see any more Outsider, we think. Mm-hmm. Although I think I heard them say that they were going to shop the series around because they did have some ideas. Of course, they've got If It Bleeds as a possibility, or they could just create something out of whole cloth and bring back the old gang again. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to be on HBO. That we know for sure.
Yeah. I'm ambivalent on that. I think that's a 1-season series. And myself, I'm not sure what they. I mean, of course, if they have a great idea, they could turn something with it. But the story is really done unless you're going to really start going into X-Files or Night Stalker territory or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. But again, another case of really excellent cast. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ben Mendelsohn, who I had known from another series, I can't remember what it is right now, but it was like a sort of a family drama, and he came in as the loose cannon.
Okay.
What was it called? Yeah, I can't remember. It's from a number of years back. But yeah, so he is so. Oh, it's Bloodline. It's called Bloodline.
Okay.
And then, of course, Jason Bateman and just Juliana Nicholson, Bear Winningham, just great cast.
Right. Yeah. It was really done well. I had hardly any quibbles except for one of the episodes near the end where the love interest of Holly decided to be a hero. And I just thought, really? But other than that, I thought it was note perfect. I just enjoyed it's a slow burn, but man, oh man, some of those scenes were really tense.
And just exactly as I imagined them when I was reading the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
The visuals really captured the way I pictured it when I was reading, which is really rare in an adaptation.
Yeah. All righty. And now we come up to the biggie, and I'm gonna make a confession here, and this is one of the reasons why I haven't really been motivated to podcast. Is I came into this stand with a lot of preconceptions, and I will say that my reaction to the first episode, which is all I've seen so far, because I was so put off by it, it goes back to, this is one, like when you get older, it's hard. You understand you want to see different versions of works and that. You don't want to see a rehash of the previous miniseries. But based on the conversations that Josh Boone had on Hollywood Babylon with Kevin Smith, listening to him talk about Stephen King, I thought, wow, this guy really gets it. He really gets the characters in that. So when this first episode came and they went to this flashback format, which for me in the first episode just killed all the tension of Captain Trips and gave away a lot of the plot points that we normally would wait for to be resolved later in the story. I haven't had the wherewithal to come back to it yet, and I'm still trying to work up the energy for it. So I'm going to be letting you take this one, Bev. My understanding is reactions across the board have been relatively mixed. There's a lot of praise for the cast, but a lot of people did not like the flashback forward to storyline. What was your thoughts on it?
I have to wonder, and I haven't heard from too many people who haven't read the book and weren't familiar with the story, what sort of problems they might have had keeping up, because it seems to me like it was written for people already familiar with the story. And there's a lot of shorthand notation I found that, if you knew the book, you could say, oh, yeah, of course, yeah. But if you hadn't read the story, you might say, what's going on? And it might take people quite a while to get into it. I think, I wasn't as excited that this was coming because, we've got the Stand adaptation from 30 years ago, which, for what it was pretty decent.
Yep.
People had quibbles with it, with some of the casting, but, it was a good, solid adaptation. So I wasn't really saying we need a new adaptation to Stand when there are other things that are still unadapted. It was, some of the character choices really caught me by surprise.
Right.
And some of the characters didn't get as much play as, they had 9 hours, roughly, maybe 8 hours, because I guess one of the other things is that, because this was made for CBS All Access, there's 2 versions of that. There's one which is commercial and there's one which has no commercials. But you have to build the story for the commercial supported ones. So there's the artificial commercial break build up, scene cuts and that, which really to me, it would have been nice if you could have done something which was completely streaming without having to pay homage to the commercial advertiser regularity.
Right.
But given the amount of time that they had to play with, I felt like there was a lot missing. Yeah,
I've heard that from other people. Yeah.
In certain characters, because you haven't seen it, I won't say too much, but beloved characters really almost are cameo characters.
That hurts.
And yeah, and I mean, the acting is really, really good. Of course, people have to readjust and say, okay, this isn't the Stu Redman that we saw visually before. This is a new one. This is a different Molly. This is a different, and they do some interesting things with gender and race. Larry's now a black man. One of the 4 characters who gets sent off on the final mission is now a woman. And they have some fun with that because she's a Native American woman. And her tracking abilities are brought into question. And she, of course, busts them on racial stereotypes, but Turns out, yes, she really does have good tracking abilities. But we lose big chunks of the story.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want me to say anything about which ones those are.
No, yeah, go ahead. I've heard enough.
So like the story of Stu and Tom Cullen.
Yeah.
That's not there at all.
Mm.
You know, they spend a whole winter together, and there's that whole survival story, and that's just gone.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. That's weird.
I come away from it feeling, I don't know that I would ever feel the need to watch it again. Right. I enjoyed it as I was watching it. Mm-hmm. But I think when I think visually of The Stand, I'm still always going to go back to the original. Right. It hasn't overwritten those brain cells.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking that maybe I just know this story too well, and if I was younger and coming to it for the first time, then maybe this miniseries would have really spoke to me. But yeah, that first episode and the decision to make Harold such a major character, is my understanding that continues through to the rest of the series as well, was just, I think somebody, I don't know who was a showrunner, said he considered Harold as the main protagonist of the story. And I was going, what? Like,
I didn't have any problems with that. And I actually sort of agree. I think he is, you know, he's not Randall Flagg, but Randall Flagg is so distant from the good guys through most of the story that Harold really is the antagonist, the Joker. Yeah, you know, he's living among them and, you know, putting on his best face. Mm-hmm. They've turned him from a sort of overweight, slovenly into more of a incel, I guess is the way they call them these days.
Yeah.
So it was hard to like him very much ever.
Yeah.
Right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But
and then like Franny's reaction the first time he talks to her is like, really, you're just going to telegraph it that quickly? what she thinks of him? It was like, it was really blatant. So,
but I would say the one thing that I really enjoyed, and I waited for it through it all, and it paid off, was the final episode, which contains a coda that isn't in the book. Yeah, and it involves what happens after the end of the book when Stu and Franny decide they're going to head back east.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of ties into the Dark Tower themes, I believe.
A little bit,
yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. I'm. That's probably the main reason why I am going to watch it eventually. I just wasn't in that, you know, with the COVID and everything. I don't really want to spend watching this and being mad all the time, and I don't want to come on the podcast either and talk about negative things or things negatively that much either, because who needs that?
Absolutely.
People come to these kinds of things to get excited about things, not to get depressed. And so I'm going to stay away from it as much as I can, and we'll move on from there unless there's anything else you wanted to add about The Stand.
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah. I just really thought Josh Boone had a different vision, and I understand. That's the thing I wanted to mention about the first episode. For as much as people, like, if you're going to use flash forward, flash backwards, you have to use it to recontextualize things. Like, I know people always are poo-pooing the ending of Lost, but the one thing that show did really well with its flashing forward and backwards, it really made you look at characters in a new light, or you were thinking that they were going to go down this one path, but then when you saw this other thing, it made you rethink what their actions actually were targeted towards. And I don't feel that was done with this version of that type of storytelling. It just basically gave away the goods, which I just totally didn't understand. So
I'm in the middle of a rewatch of Lost right now. I'm up to season 3. It's one of my COVID binges. And one of the really nice things about it is it's been, 16 years since it.
Scary.
so there's a lot I don't remember.
Right.
And so I can continue to be surprised by this show that I watched and loved, absolutely adored during its first run.
Right.
But what's really cool is seeing things come into the story and saying, I know why they're doing that. I know how this is going to pay off. And on the other hand, saying, I forgot they were going to do that. And it's this combination of foresight and forgetfulness.
Right. And overall, have you been enjoying your rewatch?
Absolutely.
Good.
And I'm Team Lost all the way to the end. I have no complaints with the ending.
Same here. Maybe I should do that. Yeah, I need that, because I really thought that story was really well written the first couple of seasons for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So that's everything I believe that was adapted on TV lately. And look at what's coming soon. And the next one would be one that we're both excited for, because I really like this. And this is a perfect bookend to Bag of Bones, and this is Lisey's story, and hopefully this adaptation will be better than the most recent adaptation of Bag of Bones, but we shall see. Some of the early previews look good. I like how they've depicted the bayou that we've seen in the promos, and great cast here. I mean, Juliana Moore, Clive Owen, the baddie is Dane DeHaan, and hopefully in a second chance scenario for Joan Allen, who was in A Good Marriage, which was
Good Marriage, that's right,
a rarely flat adaptation of that story. I hope that one gets somebody does that one again, because that was just really flat. And we've got Jennifer Jason Leigh. So yeah, this is looking promising. And King is heavily involved in this one as well.
He's really heavily involved. Mm-hmm. I mean, his philosophy with adaptations is usually I'm all the way in or I'm all the way out.
Yeah.
It's either hand it off to the other team and let them do it. He might answer questions and do things like that, but limited involvement. Whereas this one, he's been heavily involved to the extent that he's written the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
However many 8, 9, 10 episodes there are of it. It was really close to being finished when they had to shut down because of the coronavirus.
Right.
I think they had something like 20 days or something like that left on the shooting schedule. And I kept looking for news to say that they'd started back up again, and I never really saw that. But then Apple released the first promo from it a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, it's this summer. Nothing specific yet in terms of dates, but this summer. So yeah, that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
It's a controversial book. People either love it or hate it.
Yeah.
It's, like you said, the perfect bookend to Bag of Bones, where Bag of Bones is about the writer who lost his wife. This is about the wife of the writer who lost the husband. And together they make a very nice companion set. And, Apple TV has done some really good stuff. And I don't know where you're going to get to see it in Canada. Do you get Apple TV in Canada?
I'm not subscribed to, but I believe we do, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah. But yeah, it's... I
think Big Driver was done on Apple TV, wasn't it?
Not down here. Apple TV's only been around for about a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
The first thing that came out on them was The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston. That was their big launch.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, Julianne Moore is, she's a really good actor, and all the female actors in this cast are top notch. Jennifer Jason Leigh, who I haven't seen in a long time, but Joan Allen, very good actor, and the rest of the cast. I don't know how big their parts are going to be, but it'll be interesting, especially since King is so heavily involved in this. He was heavily involved in the TV version of the Shining, and that had mixed results as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he does this time. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a great story. It should be interesting. And that's another one that is being adapted to. And I should ask you about is Elevation. I was a big fan of that book. I was really surprised to see a lot of people weren't that impressed with it.
Well, if you're going to Stephen King looking for horror,
yeah,
this has sort of horrific elements to it.
Yeah,
but it's not. It's a charming story. It's an uplifting story.
Yeah,
and I think King maybe went through a bit of a period where he was just interested in writing things that were uplifting.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So I think that's one that's, in very early stages of development. So
yeah. It's a small story, but it's got big ideas. The other book that reminds me of it a lot is Neil Gaiman's Ocean at the End of the Lane. Also a small book, but with big ideas.
Well, and some of the best adaptations of King have been the novella adaptation.
Yeah.
The works where you don't have to strip a bunch of stuff away, and you also don't have to pad it with a bunch of stuff like they do with some of the short story adaptations.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then up next was just recently, and this project has been in gestation even longer than your Dissonant Harmonies, Bev, and that would be the Steven Spielberg spearheaded version of The Talisman.
Well, he acquired the rights to The Talisman before the book was published.
Yeah.
So that's 37 years ago. So that's how long this thing has been in various stages of production. And every, handful of years, it sort of pops up. I remember 2006, they were going to make a 6-hour miniseries. Then it was going to be a movie, and then it was going to be this and it was that. But this time I actually feel like it's closer to being a reality.
Yeah, I think streaming platforms it's the perfect place for it.
Yeah, and I don't think Netflix is going to announce something or allow something to be announced without it really looking like it's going to go full tilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just hoping that this gets the go ahead and does well, and maybe it will spark the fuse that will get King and Straub together to finish the trilogy.
Yeah, that one's we've been waiting for that one for a long time. And I saw Steve and Peter at an event a number of years ago in Brooklyn. It was Steve and Owen and Peter and his daughter Emma. And they talked about the fact that they had been swapping ideas back and forth, and they had the basic structure and concept for what the third book was going to be about, but they're both really busy guys, and Peter's had some health issues, and he's been working on this same novel of his for a number of years. And so I hope they find some time to work on it, but I'm not sure that it'll happen.
Oh my goodness, that would be an asterisk on Stephen's bibliography. We can't have that. I mean, I know you corrected me that another one would be The Plant, but that's really an online only version of a story that hasn't been completed. This is big.
Well, yeah, but I could say it hasn't been completed, but in a sense, it has been completed. It's been completed twice. There's two completely standalone books.
True.
It's not like we're leaving the quartet on the train, blame the mono, and what's going to happen. There are endings to their stories, and but definitely, I mean, I would love to see another one.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Any other King things in the works that you wanted to mention?
There's always 100 things in development.
Yeah.
But there's remakes, and they're doing a new Firestarter.
Yes.
That's coming along. They've got casting at least. Once you start hearing casting, then you think, well, they're actually pretty serious about this. There's the Sleeping Beauties graphic novel too that's going along with my friend Rio Ewers is writing the script for that.
I'm looking forward to his next book too.
I'm just started it today.
Oh, nice.
Lola on Fire.
Yeah.
And man, this book starts on fire.
Yeah, he's good. I really enjoyed his previous book. He really reminded me of King in a way with the ideas that he had in that one. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was quite the good read. All right, so let's turn to a book that I just finished yesterday, and that was your novella, The Ogilvy Affair. And I got it in paperback form through Amazon. And just so if you're curious because I assume this is some sort of print on demand function that Amazon provides, but this was printed in Bolton, Ontario. So,
seriously?
Yes. So I guess they have a facility there.
How did you find that out?
It's on the very back page of the book. Back. Manufactured by Amazon.ca, Bolton, Ontario.
Made in USA, North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Is my copy.
So
go ahead.
Okay, so this is a whodunit with a private eye, and it's in an indeterminate time period. And I want to question you on that, but because you did mention that in your afterword as something to that point. But we have a guy here, Quentin Sawyer, and he's summoned to go out of town to help out a client, a very rich client who's had an attempt made on his life. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where the idea came from and the various forms that it took before it got into this final version?
Well, I've always been a big fan of crime fiction, detective fiction, mysteries. I cut my teeth on the Hardy Boys and Agatha Christie, and I've read all the hard-boiled writers. And I don't know what it was that inspired me, whether there was a call for an anthology or something, but this story has been through development for about 20 years, so even longer than Dissonant Harmonies. And it originally was a bit of a gimmick story. It was called Black and White originally, and the gimmick was that my main character lived in a color world, like color television, and when he gets summoned to go back to help this client to this small town, he enters a black and white world. And I was playing with how to depict that non-visually, in words. How do I show the difference between somebody who knows things in color? And he regresses back into becoming a hard-boiled type character himself.
I see.
And so that was a fairly short story, and then I rewrote it a bunch of times. And then at a certain point, I decided I was going to go in a completely different direction with it. And it became the Ogilvy Affair. The way the story, the resolution to the mystery is different. And the story grew. And it grew and grew and grew. And now it's about 17,000 words. And a little bit too long for just about any place that might publish that sort of thing. Mm. I entered it into a couple of contests over the years, novella contests. But, pandemic, lots of time on my hands. You always hear about people who are self-publishing, and I thought, how hard is this? And I had made a couple of half-hearted attempts, maybe a year or two ago, and I got bogged down. Mm-hmm. But then I discovered, actually, this is really pretty easy.
Oh, strictly through Amazon?
Strictly through Amazon. Amazon provides the software for formatting the ebooks, and you just load your text into it, and you go through and you play around with it a bit. I purchased a couple of Shutterstock images, one for the ebook, which is just like a one-pager, and then a wraparound version for the paperback version. Mm-hmm. And I had the ebook ready in about 2 days.
Wow.
And it took a little bit longer for the paperback because, first of all, I wasn't sure I was going to do the paperback. Mm. But then there were some people who said, I'd really like to have a book. So I had to reformat it as a PDF for the paperback edition. And I had the wraparound image and all of that extra stuff. But it was quite easy. Mm. The difficult part, of course, is getting word out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not the sort of big name writer in fiction, especially that people are necessarily going to go looking for, what has Bev Vincent published lately.
Right.
So you've got to, beat the bushes and, send out tweets and post blogs and add links. And I'm happy to say I've turned a profit on it. I've sold enough copies to pay for the stock photos.
Oh, good.
So it's a success. I had at least one Amazon review from somebody who I don't know, who seemed to like the story. I describe it as hard-boiled Agatha Christie, because the main character really is, sort of a fairly classical hard-boiled detective.
Right.
But it's a whodunit, and it's quite pleased with the clues that really point towards the resolution, but that are probably a little bit. I don't think people are necessarily going to guess who it is, but once you get the answer, you can see that I maybe played fair.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think you've done the timing of the reveal was basically when it happened or just before it happened. I said, this is what the mystery really is. And then it happened. And then I go, that's perfect timing because you stayed. I mean, some other readers obviously might be ahead of me and they might figure it out beforehand, but I figured it out maybe like a page or a chapter before, or maybe a paragraph. Like it was really close. And I was going, wow, that's perfect timing. So, and then when it happened, I go, aha. And then I was, okay, that's the way you want to do it. So that was really nicely done. So I congratulate you on that. That was really paced quite well.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm quite pleased with the title. I won't say anything more about that, but I'm quite pleased with it.
Yeah, I was wondering you might have called it the Ogilvy case, but yeah.
A mysterious affair styles. Agatha Christie's first. You have to get that in there. Mysterious affairs. Yeah.
The one thing I was I was struggling with, or I wanted to know, is when the story was taking place. And it seems like you deliberately were being vague about that. And you did mention a movie, and I Googled it, so I kind of got a time frame for it then. But it seems like you really didn't want to nail down a time period. Am I correct? Or that's
true. Yeah, I thought I wanted it to be sort of timeless, because the small town that he goes back to is. It's lost in time. And if you sort of think back to the original concept, this character was going back in time really when he went back to visit them. But there's lots of small towns in Texas where you drive through them today. They've got the movie theater on Main Street with the marquee and the soda shop, and they feel like you've gone X number of years, whether it's 30 or 40, 50 years back in time.
Okay.
And I wanted there to be a bit of a sense of that without there really having to be time travel. And so, yeah, I do mention a movie to anchor it a little bit in time, but a small town doesn't get movies at the same pace that the big city does.
Yeah, that's the other.
There's a little bit of wiggle room there.
Exactly.
But I think I have versions of it where he does stuff on the internet.
Oh.
And then I sort of let's go back to newspapers, and so it's 70s ish, but give or take. I didn't really feel the need to nail it down any more than that.
Okay. Yeah, I took it to be in the late 50s, early 60s, but it was interesting. But so when you threw in that 12 Angry Men, I thought, okay, maybe that's when I was going to do it. But
yeah, I mean, it could always been like a revival.
Yeah.
I was really pleased that I was able to get the ransom note font in there.
Yeah,
small things that please you when you're designing a book. But,
was that hard to do? Was that just like inserting an image, or
it's a font. It's a real font.
A real font. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I found that font and I thought, that's exactly what I wanted.
Oh, cool. Cool. I assumed it was an image that you pasted in or something, but PDF or something. But I'm curious, in your writing process for this, because you had this over a number of years, do you have a writing group or feedback or beta readers or anything like that? How does that work for you?
I did way back in the early days,
right.
Late 90s, early 2000s. I was a member of the Woodlands Writers Guild.
Mm-hmm.
And for a short time, I was in a writing group with Hank Schwabel and Rhodey Hawk and David Liss. But I do have some beta readers for my story, The Dead of Winter in Dissonant Harmonies.
Right.
There's a guy named Todd Clark who does beta reading for a lot of people like Brian and myself and other like our Nikon group.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me some really good feedback on it. He was the first person to read it. And then for the larger stuff, I have my agent who is a really hands-on editor, and we've spent a lot of time on some of my longer projects.
Okay.
I have a novel with him. That was my other COVID project. I had a novel that I wrote probably 10 years ago.
Right. I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
That he read once, and he had some issues with it. And Brian Freeman had read it, and he's doing this. He's got this project called Detours, and he's done one volume already, and it's essentially deleted materials from other projects. And he approached me and said, I'm doing a second one of these. Is there anything from this novel that you think you could strip out and turn it into something that could be a standalone for
right.
the Detours too? And so I went through and I was doing this, and all of a sudden, as I was working on this, I thought, hey, I really, really like this book again. I'm not going to just give him this stuff as, throwaway. But one of the comments that my agent had said was that I had too many point of view characters. Some of them didn't really contribute to the conclusion of the book. They just had a point of view along the way, but they didn't deserve the viewpoint.
Right.
And so I went through one character and I stripped out all of her stuff from her point of view and bundled that up and gave that to Brian.
Okay.
Of course, that meant I had to rewrite because she had information that I needed to convey in other ways. And so and there were other characters who I also stripped out and had to do that for. And so I completely rewrote the book. And I made it a post-COVID book.
Okay.
Because it's about a writer's convention. And so I added this layer to it where it's people who have been in lockdown for this period of time trying to figure out what it means to be back in groups again.
Right. Okay. So is this like 2022, 23?
I was optimistic when I wrote it, and I think it's originally set in September 2021, which is not beyond the realm of possibility, but maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe, but ultimately it's never going to get published in 2021. So
okay.
Yeah, and if a publisher buys it, then they'll have opinions about when it should be set to. But
right.
It's in the hands of my agent right now, so I'm waiting to hear back from him on it.
Okay. Question about the Ogilvy Affair. Quentin Sawyer, is this a character that you would consider revisiting or creating a series based upon?
Conceivably. I do have other series characters who I revisit from time to time. So I've got this guy named Benjamin Kane, who is a contemporary detective, and he's part of a small group. He and his brother and another guy have a detective agency in Houston. And I've published several stories that feature them, and I have a few more on my hard drive looking for homes. And I have a couple of novels that feature him as well. And so I do have hopes that Benjamin Kane could turn into a series novel character.
Okay.
And then I've got this group of very inept criminals. There's 5 or 6 of them who like to hang out at this bar in Boston and plan ill-advised schemes. And the first story, The Bank Job, won the Al Blanchard Award in 2010. And I've since published a couple of others. There's one called Sticky Business, where they try to steal some maple syrup because they've found out how much maple syrup is worth.
Oh, yes, I remember that story. That was in the news at one time. I remember that, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the newest story, which just came out in an anthology called Masthead, is called The Lobster Trap. And again, they got the idea that they're going to steal lobsters. Just as the COVID crisis is happening, and just plunges the value of lobsters because China's not buying them anymore, restaurants are shutting down, and so they end up sitting on this big stock of lobsters. And I do envision a collection someday that's the continuing misadventures of this gang that can't shoot straight. Yeah, I've got another story of theirs that's not been published called The Vacuum something or other. I can't remember right now, but yeah, it's a clever idea that I read about these people in France who tried to steal money from an overnight safe in a department store. And I thought, well, these guys would try that, but it would just go badly wrong, and of course it does.
Oh, very good. So are you still maintaining your daily writing routine? Are you getting up at 5:30 and writing before you switch over to work?
Up at 5, exercise till 5:30 or whenever the episode of Lost ends. The main difference is that my commute now is a 90-degree turn from my writing desk to my work desk. I've been working completely at home since last March.
Right. I know your work desk is a stand-up desk. Is your writing desk a stand-up desk too? Or
both of them are.
Yeah.
My writing desk was first.
Oh, okay.
And then I got one for work as well. So I've got the two kangaroos facing each other almost right now.
Very good. Okay. Is there anything else from your own writing that you wanted to mention at this time, or have we covered the spectrum of what you got going?
It's been a pretty good year, despite all everything else that's been going on. I've had quite a few short stories published in a variety of sources. Black Cat Mystery Magazine has one of my Keene stories, my Benjamin Keene stories.
Okay.
What else have I had recently? I won the first contest that the Cemetery Gates Society had for shortish fiction. I did a story for Gamino Iglesias for his Hall Dark Holidays anthology.
Oh, okay.
I've got my first Sherlock Holmes story. It came out late last year.
Ah, cool.
That was fun to write completely. I don't know if you call it pastiche or not, but it's really as honest a Sherlock Holmes story as I could possibly hope to write.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm tooling around with a story too right now, short story. It's based on actually a YouTube video I saw of, there's quite a few of them actually. I'm sure you've seen them where people go up to people's doorsteps and steal their Amazon packages.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got a story idea for that, but there's one that you should check out. It's called Mississauga. Well, just do Mississauga Man Amazon packages, and it's hilarious. He freaks out because just as he's going to reach the package, the homeowner opens the front door, and so he jumps back, and there's just a little bit of snow and that, but so his car's there, so he gets into the car and he's freaking out and he backs up, but he turns really sharp and he gets up on the curb, and there's like a really small snowbank. But his car is a small front-wheel drive car, and his wheels are off the ground. And it's hilarious. I couldn't believe it. You have to check it out. It's so funny.
Have you seen the one where they put out these misleading packages for people to steal, and they're full of fart machines and glitter and all that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm working on it's going to be a horror story, actually, short story. I'm working on that, and I want to submit that to Writers of the Future. Let's turn to another book that came out. And that would be the latest book from Stephen King. And it was called Later. And man, I got to tell you, because with a lot of people, I've been in a bit of a funk this last year because of the way things have been going. This was a much needed shot of adrenaline energy. And I was surprised that the pace of this book was, and King going back to fairly hardcore horror in this one, even though it's a Hardcase Times book. But man, it's great to see that he still has a fastball in him when he's in the mood to do that. And I really enjoyed this one. This was a big surprise because I think we're all really looking more forward to the next book, Billy Summers. But Billy Summers can top this, then it's going to be another vintage Stephen King year.
I did a series of 3 essays on News from the Dead Zone online.
Right. Yeah.
About King as a crime writer, and I observed a trend in his crime fiction recently, and that is you start with more or less straight crime. you start to hedge a little bit more, and then by the third, you're fully into supernatural land.
Yep.
And he did that with the Mercedes series.
Yep.
And then with the Hard-Case Crime books, he started with the Colorado Kid, which has implications that there's something weird going on, but there's nothing overt.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time you get to Joyland, there's definitely some surreal stuff going on. And then from the very beginning of later, he says this is a horror story, and there's no doubt about it that this is supernatural all the way through.
Yeah. So this one takes the I see dead people and
yes.
but works it in an interesting way. And with King's knowledge of book publishing and whatnot, he uses that to good advantage. And the whole concept of an editor taking basically the cliff notes from their prize author and and producing what critics arguably called the best book in the series it was quite a hoot. And
that was apparently the original germ of the idea was,
okay.
What happens to an agent if their cash cow keels over? How can they make the best of that? Well, very, very creative solution to that problem.
Yes, it was, for sure.
But then, of course, that is just the motivator.
Yeah.
This little boy, and we're not spoiling anything by saying right from the beginning, he can talk to the recently dead.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother realizes what trouble this could be.
Yeah.
Because dead people die with secrets. And if this little kid is able to tap into those secrets, he's going to be in high demand.
Yeah.
Which makes it all the more ironic when it's his mother who's the first person to exploit him.
Yeah.
and in so doing, opens up this whole string of events,
yes.
which leads to whatever happens in the rest of the book.
Yeah, for sure. And given the rules that he has in place for how long protagonist Jamie Conklin can talk to these dead people, and that sets up some very unique situations and some, if you've watched The Sixth Sense, you can imagine some of the conditions of the bodies and whatnot. King plays with that quite well in here, and I really enjoyed some of the sequences that he had for that. So that was really quite well done.
And it's a lot more urgent than The Sixth Sense because of
yes.
his time limit.
Yeah.
He can't just see any random old dead person.
Exactly.
The person is very recently dead, and
yeah, it's really well done. There's a couple of references to other King's works, specifically the Ritual of Chud.
Yes, and the Deadlights.
And the Deadlights, which I found quite tasty and quite enjoyed that. The character work, as usual, is stellar. There's three main characters, Jamie Conklin, his mother, and his mother's girlfriend or lover. And
yep.
She's a cop, and she's on the cover, I would assume, since she's
yes.
got the badge. Yep. So that sets up something interesting as well. And there's a twist that I kind of suspected, but I also enjoyed. But I have to say that this is an open-ended book, and I've gone on record as saying that this should have a sequel, and I think it should be called Sooner or Soon. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, before I get into that, I want to say one thing that really caught me by surprise by this book is I didn't flip through the pages, so I didn't realize that there was this big Joyland preview at the end. And so the ending came upon me an awful lot faster than I thought it was going to. So I was saying, hey, there's like 20 pages left. What's going to happen? And, we're done. I don't think you could do a book called Sooner because that would sort of imply a prequel, and we can't really go much earlier in Jamie than he's 6 years old.
I'm thinking that time will have 20 years later. Time's passed, so that later has now become Sooner. So or soon, because there's something that's unresolved that he's going to have to face eventually.
Yes.
So, and then that would be soon. It's going to happen soon.
True.
So we'll see. But this was what a change of pace from King. Man, it was just quite a 250 page fastball, and King writes so well that this really felt more like a short story than one of his regular books where you get like 600, 800 pages or whatever. So yeah, I felt it was more like a short story than a novel. Yeah,
and then we get Billy Summers in August.
Do you know the page count on that?
I was just going to check that out. It seems to me it's like 500 or...
Okay.
Not massively long. He talked... 528, they're saying. He talked a little bit about this when he did his interview with John Grisham last year. Primarily, he talked about the fact that he was going to set the book during 2020.
Right.
But there are a couple of characters that he wanted to get off screen for a while, and he was going to send them on a cruise.
Right.
And he suddenly realized that 2020 was not the ideal time for anybody to be taking a cruise, so he pushed it back to 2019.
Yeah, and that's an interesting character that he's decided to do as a hitman. King's a master of making us feel sympathetic for characters. Like take Harold Lauder from The Stand, for example. So I'm sure that he's going to do a good job with this, much like he did with Johnny Smith in The Dead Zone, who was really like a Harvey Oswald character in a sense.
True.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I'm curious if there's any other tidbits, or do you have any idea if King has anything scheduled for next year, 2022?
Yep. He has the third book in the Gwendy series with Richard Chizmar.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Gwendy's Final Task. That will be out in February, I believe, from Cemetery Dance.
That's right. Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
Sometime thereafter from Gallery Scribner.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is Gwendy's Final Task. So presumably the end of a trilogy. It sounds very final.
All right. Yes, it does. And anything else beyond that?
Beyond that, I know he's working on things, but he hasn't said anything specific about anything else that he's working on.
I'm wondering if because he spent so much time with the Lisey story, if we're maybe not going to get a standalone book from him next year or not.
We're early enough in 2021 that he could certainly get something that could come out in late. They're not going to collide with Gwendy, so it would be, again, a August, September, October book, assuming there is one.
Right. And I have to say, I saw him on a round of interviews on Good Morning America, and I really liked the one that he did with Drew Barrymore, where they kind of went through a bunch of movies and that. And that was quite nice to see. And I have to say, he was looking really spry. I think he looked like in better health than I've seen him in the last couple of years. I don't know, maybe it was just really good lighting and makeup, but he was at home. He was at home, but I thought, boy, he's really looking quite good.
Yep, well, I think he's doing just fine. He's had his 2 shots of the vaccine now. Yep, all good.
Yeah, so he's looking really good. So us fans are always hungry, but I just hope he can keep it up. But he seems to be on the top of his game. If later's any indication of that, for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, I think that's everything that I had on the itinerary. I don't know if there's anything else you want to mention. I don't want to keep you too long. We've been over an hour already, and I appreciate your time.
I don't think so. I mean, anybody who wants to check out my stuff, like you mentioned, my website's bevvincent.com.
Yep.
You can find me on Twitter if you don't mind me spouting off some political crap. I have a little essay in a forthcoming book from the Mystery Writers of America. It's called How to Write a Mystery.
Okay.
And the little bit I contributed was my experience with Twitter, how I had to make a decision at some point about whether I was going to be political or not.
Right.
And there are risks involved in doing that.
Yep.
But my experience was that my readership exploded on Twitter as soon as I started being my political self. So that's been an interesting experience.
Yeah. Well, I would have to think that with a new president in that's calmed down a little bit for you.
Yeah, it's nice not to have to wake up every morning and worry about what's today's crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice to not even have to think about the president at all for a day or 2 or 3, just to know he's doing his job.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people don't agree with me about that, of course, but that's the risk you take. If you follow me on Twitter, you're just going to have to put up with that.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess the only other thing I'm going to mention is and this is a little bit of a tangent, but I recently came across a YouTube channel from a fantasy writer, Brian Lee Durfee, and I highly recommend for everyone out there that you check him out. Though he's known for writing fantasy, he is a voracious reader, and he reviews everything that he reads, and he reads mysteries, westerns, science fiction, cozies, fantasy, obviously, and he's just a hoot. And his passion for writing, like he's big on Louis L'Amour and Elmore Leonard and all these other writers that are out of his field, but he just talks about reading across genres to improve yourself as a writer and obviously as a reader to be more well-grounded for the entertainment. He also talks about writing a little bit. And another thing that he talked about, and something for some reason I never considered, and I don't know why, because I go to the library quite regularly, is how to preserve and protect your books. And he shows how to apply to paperbacks clear contact to protect your books, and also how to, you can buy dust jackets, clear mylar plastic dust jackets for your books. And he shows you how to put those on us too. So Bev, you'll be happy to know that your book was the first one I tried it on. So the Ogilvy Affair is now nicely wrapped in a plastic contact covering, and turned out pretty good. So yeah, there's some pretty neat tips there on how to preserve your books. And then I went ahead and did all my King paperback hard case crime books, and now I have to get some more for all the other paperbacks. Like I've got the 6 individual Green Mile paperbacks that I want to preserve. So that's something that everybody out there should check out his channel. That's Brian Lee Durfee, Durfee. I highly recommend it. If you're a passionate reader, he's a hoot to listen to. And yeah, it's a great channel to check out.
Do you have any books to plug that you read recently that you want to?
Books that I've read recently. I've read The Sparrow, which is a story about first contact with a probe set out by Jesuits. And it's quite old actually now. I'll have to look up who wrote it. Mary Doria Russell. And it came out in 1996, and there's also a follow-up I haven't read, Children of God. So that's without getting into it, it's a first contact that goes horribly wrong. So it was quite interesting. I've read some James Lee Burke. Actually, I listened to one of his audiobooks, and boy, that guy is a fantastic writer. He sure is. He really works the words, and just gorgeous. And his books that I read take place in New Orleans. So, he really captures this Cajun flavor, I guess you could say, of that. What else have I read later? I read your book. I'd have to go to my library list. It's I have to admit, for the first couple of months that I was off because of COVID, I didn't even feel like reading. So
I'm still having a bit of a hard time, but
yeah,
it's getting better. So I told you I was reading Rio Yours' book, Lola on Fire.
Right.
I just finished Linwood Barclay's new one.
Okay. It's
called Find You First. It's really, really fast action thriller. I've become sort of pals with Linwood. But about this time, I should be meeting up with him when he comes on his book tour, but of course that's not happening this year.
Yeah.
But he lives in Ontario. He's originally American, but he was a journalist with the Toronto newspapers for a while, and now he's been writing this long series of thrillers.
Right.
And then the other book I read recently is my friend Sarah Langan, who I met at Nikon. She has a book called Good Neighbors. And it's essentially, if you think of Desperate Housewives crossed with The Crucible. It's a bunch of people on a street, and there's an inciting incident that disrupts their tentative peace among them, and one family becomes ostracized because it's an accusation made by somebody else, and it just blossoms up from there.
Right.
And it's been getting some really, really good notice.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking here. Okay, so I've read the latest Dresden books from Jim Butcher, Peace Talks and Battleground. Fantastic series. Highly recommend that one. I read Gwendy's Magic Feather, The Only Good Indians, which is getting a lot of buzz.
Oh, great book. Great book.
What else have I got here?
Stephen Graham Jones.
Yes. Yeah. Afterland that's still on order. I haven't got that yet. When She Was Good by Michael Robotham. He's a fantastic writer too. I really enjoy him.
I've read a couple of his books.
What else got here? Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia.
Yes.
A lot of these are recommendations by King, actually. So, and what else have I got? Survivor Song by Paul Trombley. Did I read that? And The Ninth House. That was good. Le Bordugo. The Dark Corners of the Night by Meg Gardner. And Unsub. I think those are 2 books in the same series about an FBI.
Oh, by Meg Gardner.
Yeah. FBI. Cold Storage by David Cope. Where the Crawdads Sing. That was a good book by Delia Owens. So it's been all over the place. My reading habits have changed quite a bit over that, because I used to be before when I was younger, was basically just science fiction, was king horror. And then I've come into the mystery thriller field a bit more, because I never really read a lot of those when I was younger. And so I've got a lot of classics to catch up on, like Elmore Leonard and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, you've got a lot to go there.
Yeah, so.
The other one, the first one I read this year was Michael Carita.
Oh, yes.
Never Far Away.
Mm-hmm. He's Canadian, I believe, isn't he? Or
no, he's American.
Oh, okay. Yep. Linwood's Canadian.
Linwood is Canadian.
And so is Rio Canadian? I believe
Yes.
So,
yes.
Good Canadian boys.
Good Canadian boys.
Just like us.
Yep.
Alrighty. So I think that's going to wrap it up.
Okay.
I thank you again for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Best of luck with your welcome, and hope to do it down the road again with maybe your next book or the next big King thing. We'll see. Other than that, just everybody keep enjoying all the good stuff that's coming out. And we're all looking forward to Billy Summer, and we'll see what happens with Lisi's story as well. So good things are coming. All right. So thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, Bev.
Okay. Thank you.
You enjoy the rest of your day and rest of your weekend, and keep saving that gas. Hopefully it's not going to evaporate on you. All right, everybody, stay safe, but stay scared.